So children, let's begin with the Age of Guptas, chapter 5, and we are on page number 58 as per the old books. And be ready with your pencil, and we'll be marking the content which we are going to do. And side by side, these content are your short answers, your long answers, and they become very important in the wake of those people who came to India to visit, and side by side they brought into light what was hidden from others. For years people didn't come to know what is what, but with the help of the travelogue of the travelers, especially if we talk about Faheen and Huin Sang, we came to know about so many things. So let's come back to page 58 and mark a few things. I'll be reading out for you and explaining side by side, and you will do this with me. So let's talk about, first of all, which period is known as the golden age of Indian culture. So we are on page 58, as I told you. The period of about 2 centuries from early 4th century AD is known as the imperial age of Guptas. So if I ask you, obviously the question is asked, which period is known as the imperial age of the Guptas? You have the answer. Underline this. And the question is, you can write in the margin, which period is known as the imperial age of Guptas? Underline, write the question in the margin, then we will move ahead. During this period, India made great progress in the field of education, science and culture. This period is also known as the classical age or the golden age of Indian history. Now the second question, children. The question will be, in fact you can frame it on your own. Why is this period known as golden age or classical age of the history? And the answer is, which we have just marked. During this period, India made progress in the field of education, science and culture. All around progress was made in this particular period, which resulted, as I talked about, peace, progress, prosperity, if you remember. So this progress led to the establishment of golden age. So in these first 6 lines, we have done 2 questions, answers of 2 questions. These questions you don't have to write in your notebook, children. Whatever straight answers are written in the book, I am telling you again and again, that you don't have to do in the notebook. In the notebook, you have to do those answers where you have to comprehend, where you have to apply your knowledge. Remember those skills: comprehension and analysis and application. You don't have to mug up those things which we are doing. You have to understand them. So I repeat, which time period is known as the imperial age of the Guptas? You have the answer. Why is this period known as classical age or golden age of Indian history? You have the answer with you. Now we come to sources, from where we come to know about Guptas. And this is very important, something very important, because in India, as I said, we never had tradition of writing history. So we have to depend on other sources only. Secondly, whatever was written, there was no proper way of storing things also. Like why we began with GCR? Because in GCR your content is safe. Whenever you want to go back to these videos which we are making and sending you, you can obviously obtain them from there. You can keep them. They are on YouTube. Most of the videos, they are on YouTube. You can all the time, get from there. So idea is to make knowledge available, accessible rather. Remember in the food accessibility, Professor Amartya Sen, which when I talked about, I told you this word. So this is the lesson we learned from history. Let's come to sources and start underlining. Accounts of Faheen. Ab here accounts doesn't mean, that accounts which your accounts office maintain, or the subject accountancy which is taught in class 11th and 12th. Here accounts mean, this is the usage of this word. Accounts mean the content which is available, the journals which Faheen maintain, and the information which we get from there. So as per the usage, the meaning of the word changes in English language. You know it very well. So let's go back to Faheen's accounts. We are on first line. Fahim was the earliest Chinese pilgrim who visited India on a religious mission during the reign of Chandragupta II. Now, another question. Who was Fahim? You have the answer over here. In whose time period, who was the king when Fahim visited India? You have the answer in this line. When you will see this video again, you can write these questions in the margin and you have the answer over here with you. That's how it's very important to underline and make your notes in the margin. Then, during his stay in India, he went on a pilgrimage to Mathura, Kannauj, Kapilvastu, Kushinagar, Vaishali, Pataliputra, Kashi, Rajgriha, and made careful observations about the conditions at that time without resorting to any bias. Meaning thereby, whatever he has written, we can trust on his information, on this information. He has not written these things to please somebody. He has written it as and when he felt what it was. But did you notice the names of the places? There are many names which you are aware of. There are many names which you places where you have been already. This is known as Buddhist circuit in our country, children. And I would request you to, go back today in the evening and find out what it is. We are all those who live in Uttar Pradesh, we are so fortunate, that all those great people, not all I would say, many of them, be it Lord Ram, be it Lord Krishna, Lord Buddha, they had spent their great deal of time over here only. They were our neighbors, so to speak, or we are their neighbors. So all these places are very familiar to you, children. So when we talk about Fahim now, you can well imagine that there was a time hundreds of years ago when he visited these places. Especially in these places like Kapilvastu, Kushinagar, Rajgriha, Vaishali, Pataliputra. You have read in the, I'll not tell you now the details. You have read these names in the chapter related to Buddhism. What happened where? You will connect now. At Kushinagar, I told you there is a huge temple. Why was it built? Go back to that chapter and find out. When we talk about Mathura, let me tell you over here. Mathura we have not done in that chapter. But in this particular time period, if we talk about Mathura and Takshashila, in British records, so to speak, you find this spelling as Taxila, Taxila, but Indians call it Takshashila. So Takshashila and this Mathura, they became great centers of schools of art. In fact, Takshashila later on, this came to be known as Kandhar School of Arts and Mathura School of Arts, where the Buddhist art and sculpture, they were created, such great creations were made that they do not have any parallel in the history of the world or that particular time period. So surf this Mathura School of Art, Kandhar School of Art, and you will see that how Buddhist sculpture and art was created at this particular time. There was a remarkable difference. In Mathura School of Art, they have used yellow sandstone to create Buddhist sculptures. In Kandhar School of Art, they have used black granite. But each and every detail, how good these sculptures were in the art of sculpting, you will see. And good for you that everything is available on internet, so that you can refer to it at any point of time from anywhere, just one click of mouse. Then Magad was a prosperous country with large towns teeming with wealthy population. Fahim has written that palaces of Magad, Pataliputra, they were huge, and he has written that it didn't look like that they are man-made structure. It looks like that they have been created by gods. So can you imagine one foreigner coming to your country and he gets so impressed by the architecture of our country that he writes those things. And we have read a few minutes back that he didn't write, he had no bias in his mind. He wrote what he felt about. Such was, was the grandeur of Indian architecture in those days. Yes, these buildings didn't survive the ravages of time. but they are still there in the accounts of Fahim. Then, Pataliputra was a flourishing city with numerous charitable institutions, including a hospital endowed by benevolent citizens. So obviously, in Sanskrit you have done Yatha Raja Tatha Praja. In class 5 I think you have this Yatha Tatha Yada Kada, this chapter in the Bhasha book, and all of you have done it. So if the king is kind, then the whole country starts behaving in that. I am not saying that bad people were not there, but majorly, like it boils down to the smallest unit of the society, the family. If elder members of the family like father, mother, grandparents, if they are kind, they take care of others, children see how our parents behave and they start behaving in the same manner. So everywhere, wherever you read about what Fahim has written, he has always praised the kings of this particular time period and the kind of generosity people showed. So when will you steal? When you don't have things to your access. But when you have enough, there is no need to steal. So that bent of mind was not there, so to speak. Although the people were wealthy, they led simple lives, generally observing the Buddhist rules of conduct. Do we remember code of conduct? And I want this, tomorrow we'll begin our class with this code of conduct we want. And I can tell you one very, one thing in code of conduct which I like, don't tell lies. So this don't tell lies talks about the character, the moral binding of the people. Vaishnavism, Shaivism, Buddhism and Jainism were the main religions. Vaishnavism, followers of Lord Vishnu. Shaivism, followers of Lord Shiva. Buddhism and Jainism, People, however, had no ill will towards other sects. What are we talking about? We are talking about freedom of religion. Religion is a matter of personal choice. Whatever people wanted to follow, they were allowed. Hindu gods and goddesses were depicted on coins and also in sculptures and paintings. This Hindu word was added later on. This was never part of culture. The penal code, we are talking about justice, was mild and the offences were ordinarily punished by fines only, because there were very less cases of such things. From the above accounts, it can be inferred that Gupta Empire was prosperous, remember this word, and governed on enlightened principles. Why should people steal? Why should people hurt others? Why should they do bad things? There should be no need. They should be morally so high, that they need to understand that whatever, if I am doing bad to others, it will come back to me. And this karma thing was very clear to them. You don't take anything when you leave this world, but your karma, baggage of karma is with you. So, next source, Allahabad Pillar inscription or the Prayag Prashasti, I'll talk in the next video. And this video deals with first source. Thank you.